Sprite Night, Revere's Fantastical Midnight Ride. Author's Note: when I set out to write fantastical tales centered around the holidays, Independence Day felt like the perfect canvas for reimagining of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. My imagination was caught specifically by the mystery of the shot heard round the world. Even today, history remains silent on who pulled that first trigger on Lexington Green, sparking the fire of the Revolution. I thought it'd be a thrill to show you all my version of how it truly happened. My protagonist found her voice after I discovered the legend of Sybil Ludington. In 1777, and only 16 years old, Sybil purportedly rode 40 miles through the rain to alert the militia, a journey twice as long as Paul Revere's. Whether her ride is a verified historical fact or merely a cherished family legend, her spirit intrigued me. I wanted to weave that bravery into a fantastical narrative, so I gave her companion for the road a small, spirited fairy friend. Tansy has quickly become my favorite character that I have ever created. She is pure, adorable chaos. I used to hear other writers claim that their characters sometimes surprise them, as if they possess a life and a will of their own, but I had never experienced that phenomenon myself until now. While I was drafting, Tansy suddenly informed me that she hadn't just arrived for the midnight ride, she had been there for the Boston Tea Party too. Writing her antics during that famous night of tea and rebellion made me burst out laughing. It was completely unexpected, and it's that kind of character-driven magic that makes this story feel alive. I hope you enjoyed journeying through this whimsical reimagining of American history as much as I have enjoyed bringing it to life. Exploring the Revolution through the eyes of a brave young woman and a mischievous fairy has been a true adventure, and I can't wait for you to see how their secret history unfolds. Chapter 1: The Tavern. "Freedom!" the little sprite bellowed, her tiny voice bursting with pride as she shot up into the crisp spring night air like a miniature comet, fist raised. Her mop of bright yellow hair fluttered in the wind caused by the beating of her frilly green wings that looked like ferns. Only a few inches tall, her frame was draped in a patchwork dress of red, white, and blue. The teenage girl lying in the ditch next to the tavern jumped. "Tansy!" she growled in a sharp whisper, her eyes darting toward the tavern windows. "Do you want to wake the whole countryside?" She dropped down to stand in the grass next to her. "I'm helping you fight the bedcoats," she replied, forming a large pout on her face. "That's red coats, not bedcoats," the girl replied. "Where did you get that dress anyway? It looks a bit silly." "Bitsy Roth gave it to me after I helped dump the tea in Austin Harbor." "Betsy Ross gave it to you? And you were at Boston Harbor when they dumped the tea?" she said with a doubtful look. "She made it from scraps of a large blanket she was making with stars and stripes on it. I think it's beautiful," the sprite said indignantly, hands now on her hips. "And how did you help dump tea, being so tiny and all?" "I did help. I found some tea that the captain had in his cup on his desk, and I flung it into the sea." The girl chuckled. "So what's the mission tonight, Sibby? Are we shadowing a vile bedcoat to thwart his schemes for that wicked British king? Or are we about to pounce on a sniveling loyalist in the name of liberty?" the sprite whispered conspiratorially. "Neither. I think the patriots are cooking something up, and I want to see what they're up to, see if I can help. Paul Revere just went into that tavern with several other men. They are plotting something." "Ooh," Tansy gushed, "a secret mission? Sprites were made for secret missions. Can I come too?" "Yes, but you have to keep quiet and follow my lead." The yellow-mopped Sprite snapped to attention with comical seriousness, puffing out her chest and throwing a crisp salute. "Aye, aye, Captain Sibby. Patriot Tansy, defender of freedom and flinger of tea, reporting for top-secret rebel action." "We need to move in closer. I want to hear every word," the girl whispered, her voice tense with anticipation. She raised a finger to her lips in a firm shush, her eyes locked on the flickering lamplight spilling from the tavern window. They slipped up to the side of the tavern below a window. She peeked in the window briefly to catch a glimpse and then darted back out of view. "He's talking to Dr. Warren." She leaned in to listen. "Right, Paul. It looks like the Redcoats are planning to cross the Charles River by boat instead of taking the long march around," the older gentleman murmured, his voice low and urgent. "You remember the signal?" "Yes," Paul replied, nodding sharply. "One if by land, two if by sea." He recited the words like a sacred oath. "I'll get to the North Church and have them hang 2 lanterns in the steeple. After that I ride. Every minute counts." The young woman slipped behind some bushes as the earnest patriot exited the tavern and gathered the reins of his horse. The older man followed him out. "How are you getting across the Charles River after the church?" "I've got some friends ready to row me across. Wish me luck." And without another word he leapt atop of his mount and cantered off. "We need to follow him and see if we can help in any way," Sybil said as she started out from behind the bush. "Sibby, wait!" hissed the fairy, pointing across the road. A young man slipped out of the shadows, his eyes locked on the rider. At his side emerged a creature clearly not of this world. Gaunt and sinewy, its skin was the color of frostbitten stone. Large bat-like ears jutted from the sides of its bald, angular head. It walked on both hind legs and long, jointed knuckles, hunched and ready to pounce. As it turned, moonlight glinted off of rows of needle-like teeth in its narrow maw. Cold, baleful eyes glowed faintly blue as it sniffed the air with an audible hiss, leaving a trail of mist in its wake. "That's a Spriggan, a Fay of the Winter Court," Tansy said with fear in her voice. "Very nasty." "And that looks like Silas Hawthorne. He and his family are known to be loyal to the king." "Grim," the young man said, "let's go." The Fay ignored him and continued to sniff again towards the young girl and the Sprite. Silas had already started walking away and turned around again. "Grimfrost, come, we have work to do." The Spriggan sniffed once more and turned and followed its master. They melted into the night as they moved away from the tavern's lighting. "Come, Tansy, we must follow. They are not up to anything good. I fear that he's going to cause trouble for Mr. Revere." Chapter 2: The Old Church. Sybil craned her neck around the corner of a house whose alley opened out in front of the Old North Church. The night air was heavy with damp, and her pulse quickened at the sight before her. Revere stood in front, speaking in hushed urgency with 2 men who gave curt nods before slipping inside the church. Casting his gaze about to be sure he was unseen, he swung back onto his horse and thundered off into the darkness. No sooner had the sound of hoofs faded than the young woman drew in a sharp breath. From the shadows of another alleyway, Silas emerged, his eyes gleaming, his Fay servant loping beside him with an unsettling grace. As they fixed their gaze on the steeple, 2 lanterns suddenly glimmered into view in the high window. Silas lifted a pale finger toward them and murmured, "Grim, you know what to do." The creature bounded up the brick wall, climbing with the ease of a spider racing along its web. Perched at the summit, it exhaled a chilling breath, snuffing the lanterns in an instant as a sheet of frost crackled across their glass. Then, with a feral shriek, it hurled itself through the window. Sybil froze as muffled screams split the silence, and moments later the two men burst from the church, terror etched across their faces, fleeing past Silas and vanishing into the night. The Spriggan emerged moments later with a ragged, coughing cackle, its large eyes gleaming with feverish delight that made Sybil's stomach twist. "Come, Grim," the young man commanded sharply. "We must be after him." Sybil stifled a cry, pressing a hand against her lips, as the face shuddered and stretched into a grotesque semblance of a horse. Its hide was a sickly ashen gray, its mane ragged and white as a snowdrift. Frost steamed from its nostrils in thick clouds, and the very ground where its hooves struck seemed to glisten with ice. With unnatural ease the Loyalists swung onto its back, and in a single bound they lunged into the night, thundering after Revere with the echo of winter at their heels. "We have to get those lamps lit, Tansy," Sybil barked as she rushed to the church. She raced up the stairs to the steeple, but found the lanterns covered in ice, and she had no wherewithal to light them even if she could get them open. The Sprite hovered in the air outside the windows. "What are we to do?" the young patriot exclaimed, tossing her head side to side frantically, looking for a solution that wasn't there. "Wait," said Tansy. "Tansy the Patriot to the rescue! I have an idea. Don't go anywhere," and she zoomed off into the night. Sybil waited for about 5 minutes, nerve fraying with each passing heartbeat, and was about to give up when the Sprite came flitting out of an alley. "Come on, you can do it. Just come with me," she coaxed in a sing-song voice. A faint glow blossomed in the mouth of the alleyway, swelling until 2 eerie orbs of light drifted forward. They swayed in a strange, playful dance, darting, halting, and spinning as though caught in some silent music only they could hear. "That's right, darlings, just follow me," the Sprite encouraged, her wings a blur as she guided them skyward. The balls of light danced along after her, trailing wisps of pale mist like comet tails. She led them up the side of the church until they hovered in the window, twin beacons against the dark. Sybil's eyes widened in awe as the lights flared to life exactly where the lanterns should have been. For a breathless moment the whole steeple seemed bathed in an otherworldly radiance. "Stay here just a little while and then you can go," Tansy told them, hands planted on her hips with mock authority. "What on earth are those?" Sybil gasped. Tansy smirked, wings beating fiercely to keep her afloat. "Will-o'-the-wisp," she declared proudly. "Found them dancing over a pond. I realize that the veil between our worlds is thin tonight, and it's why I could coax them through. They'll serve as our lanterns." Sybil blinked, her heart lifting. "Tansy, you are a genius." "I am clever, aren't I?" the Sprite crowed with a smug smile. Before Sybil could answer, the clatter of hooves echoed down the street. 2 British soldiers rode up to the church. "Oi, what's going on here?" one of them shouted. With a gleeful cry, Tansy streaked toward them. She swirled about their horses' faces, shouting, "Freedom!" The startled beasts reared violently, throwing their riders to the cobbles. Sybil leapt out of the church door, jumped on one of the horses, and sped off into the night. Chapter 3: The Boat. As Sybil drove the horse down the street, Tansy sat on the horse's head. She whispered in his ear, "You are fighting for the good guys now, my friend." The Sprite looked back at the girl at the reins. "He says that his name is Clarence." "You can talk to animals?" "Yes, of course. You can't?" "No, I can't. Humans can't do that." "Huh," the little fairy said with a shrug of her shoulders. "I thought you could. Remember when you saved me from that coyote in the forest a few years ago?" "Well, yes, of course. It's how we met," said the young woman. I came upon you cornered in a glen in the woods. I thought you told him to run away. Well, I did yell something like that, but I think it was just more of the shouting and banging rocks together that drove him off. Tansy turned back to him and then back to Sybil again. Sibby, Clarence wants to know where we are going. Mr. Revere said something about taking a boat across the Charles River. There are some docks north of here. I think he is most likely heading that way. We have to catch up to him before Silas and his little monster do. Clarence says that he knows a shortcut there. It's part of his regular patrol with the Bedcoats. This horse isn't committed to his owners? Tansy whispered something in his ear and listened. No, he is glad to be away from them. They made him sail in a big boat for a long time to come here, and he doesn't want to go back. He likes America better. Well, great. At least we have that going for us, Sybil smiled. The horse suddenly veered down a side street and broke into a faster run. They wove their way through the streets for a while until they arrived at the dock. Sybil could see 3 men getting into a boat. She rode up to them and pulled Clarence to a halt. Mr. Revere? One of the men turned his head and said, Who are you, lass? My name is Sybil Luddington. I'm trying to help you out with your mission. How do you know about my mission? He asked, eyes squinting with suspicion. Never mind that for now. There is a young man after you. He is a loyalist by the name of Silas Hawthorne. He is riding a strange-looking horse. Have you seen him? We've seen no one, lass, said one of the other men. Thank God, she exclaimed. He is very dangerous. You have to get away. He's trying to thwart your plans, maybe even hurt you. Well, we're shoving off now, he replied. One of the men stepped up to the boat and looked around. One last thing. We are going to be quietly rowing past British ships and other possible patrols. We need something to muffle our oars. Damn, I didn't think of this until now. Revere stood up and looked around the docks. We have no time. We're just going to have to chance it. Wait, Sybil said, jumping off the horse. Here, use my petticoat. She stripped it off her waist and tore it in half. You can wrap a piece on each oar. The men looked at her in shock. One of them shrugged and started tying them to the oars. This ought to help. Who are you again, miss? Just a daughter of liberty, sir, trying to do my part. And her trusty sidekick, Tansy the Patriot, said a small voice, ducking around from behind the horse's ear. The men jolted in surprise, eyes wide. What is that? Exclaimed Revere. Don't worry about it now. She's a friend. Now you best be on your way. Just then they heard horse hooves coming down toward the docks. Silas and his strange beast rode into view. Hurry, Sybil urged him. I'll hold them off. Revere paused and took stock of her again. You will not go unrecognized for your valiant service, young lady. Thank you. They shoved off into the river as Silas drew near. He hopped off his steed that then morphed back into the small fey creature. Sybil Luddington, he announced. I knew you for a traitor. You are the traitor, yelled Tansy, helping the Bedcoats and old King Georgie Porgy, their naughty king. And you have a little sprite friend, I see, he sneered, eyes narrowing. I will deal with you and your kind soon enough, but for now the chase is mine. You'll never catch up to him. You have to ride around on land, Sybil growled. Ah, that, young traitor, is where you are wrong. At Silas's command, the fey twisted back into its horse shape, a shimmer of ice tracing its mane. Its hooves struck the earth with a sound like thunder, and it surged forward with terrifying power. Frost blossomed in its wake as Silas swung into the saddle, the wind tearing at his coat while the world blurred past. They were gone before Sybil could even cry out. Tansy, we have to help Mr. Revere, but there is no way we can race that fast, Sybil cried out. Tansy flew up next to the young woman's face. I think that I can help with that. One moment. Chapter 4, The Water Road. The petite fairy flapped her way to the end of the river and started singing a mournful, wordless song. The song didn't rise like a human melody. It welled up from her, a tremor in the air, a vibration far too deep for such a small body. The reeds shivered. The water gathered itself into tiny concentric rings as if remembering something ancient. Creatures stirred beneath the surface. Her people said the river carried memories from before the mountains were born, and if one sang to it in an old tune, part lament, part longing, it would answer, not in words but in signs. Tonight, the river's reply began as a low hum, the kind that settles in your bones and rearranges your sense of proportion. She opened her palms to the current, bracing herself. Something was coming upstream, not a threat, but not quite a friend either, more like an old story waking up. The water roiled as a shape broke the surface, first a long, dripping muzzle, and then the powerful shoulders of something that only resembled a horse. It climbed onto the shore with a liquid grace, its sea-green coat shimmering like wet jade. Its mane hung in heavy strands of kelp, coiling and uncoiling around its neck with each step. Water burst outward whenever its hooves struck the earth. Yet the feature that held her breath still was its eyes, twin lanterns of bright, impossible green, glowing as if lit from within. It exuded an aura of menace that caused Sybil to step back. Good God, Tansy, what is this? This is a kelpie, the little fairy replied with a self-satisfied smile. This is a friend of yours? It seems dangerous, Sybil asked, taking a few more steps back. Well, not exactly a friend, but she owes me. She's not too happy that I summoned her, but debts are taken very seriously in my world. So what? Is your idea that she will ride fast enough for me to chase after Silas? Oh, no, Tansy said with a twinkle in her eye. She doesn't move any faster than a normal horse on land, but she is very, very fast in water. What? You, my dear Sibby, are going to take a shortcut. I can fly over the river, but you are going to take the water road. Tansy, I am not going in the water on that thing's back, Sybil declared emphatically. It's totally safe. She is bound to do my bidding, and it's the only way that you're going to catch up with your friend Polly. Get on, I promise. The young woman tied her horse to a post on the dock, and then stepped toward the water horse with measured care. It pawed at the river's edge, sending up fans of spray, clearly unsettled by the idea of a human on its back, particularly one that it was forbidden to harm. Hurry, Sibby, we have to catch up with Polly, urged the sprite. The kelpie bowed low to let her climb on, and then rose in one smooth, impossible motion, lifting Sybil to full height with a fluidity no ordinary horse could match. Its cool, slick hide soaked her undergarments and then her legs as she settled astride, skirt hitched up to keep from dragging in the water. Strands of kelp mane twined themselves into neat braids on either side, rising of their own accord to form reins for her hands. Hang on, Sibby, Tansy shouted. Marrow deep, let's ride! And the fairy darted out over the water, leading the way. Sybil gasped as the kelpie plunged into the river. It didn't so much swim as dissolve into the current, its body slipping through the water as though the river itself was carrying her. They streaked across the dark surface with breathtaking speed. Wind tore at her hair. and the cold spray of the night sent a sharp shiver down her spine. She clutched the seaweed reins tightly and kept her eyes on her friend flitting in the night before them. "I can't believe I'm doing this," Sybil cried, half laughing, half terrified. "It's fun, isn't it?" Tansy zipped ahead and then back again, tracing a tight little loop-de-loop in the air. "Tansy, those will-o'-wisps, this kelpie, are creatures like this always around us? I've lived here my whole life and never saw such a thing." "Not always," Tansy said, her voice turning a shade more serious. "The veil between our worlds is thin right now." "Why?" "Well, this is spring. We are on the cusp of summer triumphing over winter. In only a few weeks the balance will tip." "Summer and winter?" "There are two courts in my world. They are constantly battling each other. Summer is dominant half the year and winter the other half. I am of the summer realm. Silas's friend is of winter." "So it goes with the seasons? Winter will ascend in the fall?" "Yes, Sibby. Right now we're close to what your ancestors called Beltane. In the fall it was called Samhain." Sybil glanced sideways at the sprite. "And these courts you speak of, what's the difference between summer and winter?" Tansy tilted her head, wings shimmering. "The summer court thrives on growth, warmth, laughter, and mischief that heals. The winter court is older, sterner. Ice, hunger, and silence are its gifts. Summer coaxes life forward. Winter preserves it through stillness. They balance each other, though neither much likes the other's ways." "So you're summer court, then. Are all of your kind like you, and all winter folk like that horrid gremlin with Silas?" "Not all," Tansy said, wings flickering. There are cruel ones in both courts, and kind ones as well, though my court tends to favor gentler ways. But don't think of us as good and evil the way you divide humans. We're simply other." "How so?" "We simply see the world in ways you cannot. To us, your world is the one that feels inconsistent and puzzling." "What do you mean?" "Take the sheep you freed from a thicket on your father's farm." "Yes." "Later, you slaughtered it and sold the meat. To the sheep, that's bewildering. You save them one day and eat them the next. Our kind seem that way to you. We act from a different logic, one you can't easily grasp." Just then they were interrupted by a boat careening into view that held a squad of British sailors. "Ho there, you, halt!" one of the men shouted. Tansy circled about looking down at the men. One of the sailors put a musket to his shoulder. "Marrowdeep, dive!" And before Sybil knew it, she was swallowed by the river. Marrowdeep plunged so sharply that the world above shattered into ribbons of moonlight. They dove almost to the riverbed, silt blooming up around them. Yet Sybil did not choke. She drew breath as easily as if she stood on shore. The kelpie's magic wrapped her like a second skin, and now that it moved fully as one with the river, its speed became astonishing, a blur through the darkened depths. The sailors above gasped in astonishment, doubting what their eyes saw as the sprite dashed away into the night air. Within a short time the kelpie surged out of the Charles. Water cascaded from its flanks as it clambered onto the opposite shore. It gave a full-body shudder, flinging droplets in every direction, startling two men on horseback, who stared in pale-faced horror. Tansy looped triumphantly around their heads. "Once again, Tansy the Patriot saves the day," she declared, pumping a tiny fist. Marrowdeep softened like melting wax, dissolving back into the river as she lowered Sybil gently to the ground. "Thank you, Marrowdeep," Tansy called as the water drew back from shore in rippling folds. Your debt to me is paid in full." "Merciful heavens!" one of the men shouted. "What devilry is this?" Sybil, dripping wet, strode toward them. "I am on an urgent errand. Did Mr. Revere just take a horse from you?" "Yes. Well, no," stammered one of the men. "I've no notion what you're about. We're loyal to the king." "It's all right," Sybil said, steady and breathless. "I'm aiding him. He's in danger. I need one of your horses to give chase." The second man leaned forward in his saddle. "Are you the young woman he told us of? The one who saved him across the river?" "Yes, I'm Sybil Luddington, a daughter of liberty." "And I'm Tansy the Patriot," the Sprite declared, zipping loops in the air. "We're going to topple old King Georgie Porgy." Both men flinched at the sight of her. "Mercy preserve me," muttered one. The other swallowed hard, and then thrust his reins toward Sybil. "Take my horse, miss. He rides for Lexington." Sybil swung into the saddle, gave them a grateful nod, and vanished into the night at a gallop. Chapter 5 Road to Lexington. Sybil raced through the moonlit forest road, the trees blurring past in streaks of silver. Rounding a bend, she spotted 3 riders ahead, 2 redcoats chasing a lone figure. Moonlight gleamed on their coats, and they churned glistening mud beneath pounding hooves. "That's Polly Revere!" Tansy cried, darting forward on her wings. "Stop!" one of the soldiers bellowed. She urged her horse ahead, passing the one in the rear and overtaking the first pursuer. Her horse surged like lightning to flank him. As they thundered side by side, Sybil caught sight of a wide, muddy pond on the rider's left. With a sharp kick, she drove her horse into its flank, and he swerved straight into the quagmire, cursing as the muck swallowed him. Tansy swooped back to the second rider, screeching in his face and slapping his hat clean off. Startled, he careened off the road and crashed into the trees. "Keep riding, Mr. Revere. We have removed them from the chase," the young woman shouted as she continued to follow. "Miss Luddington?" Revere shouted in astonishment, looking back over his shoulder. "Aye, ride on." After a bit, they slowed to a trot. "I think that we've lost them," Sybil said. "You seem determined to keep coming to my aid," Paul said, a bit breathless from the sprint. "Sir, there is a loyalist named Silas Hawthorne who is bent on your destruction, and he has—" she hesitated, choosing her words— "help of a most uncanny kind, dangerous and not wholly of this world." "Much like you do, miss," he replied, looking at the fairy dancing in the air before him. "This is Tansy." "Like the herb?" "Yes, her kind often look similar to plants." "And I'm a patriot like you, Mr. Polly. Do you admire my fern wings?" she said, giving them a jaunty flutter before his eyes and a winsome smile looking over her shoulder. "Fascinating. I have heard the old tales, but had no idea that such creatures actually exist." "And this Silas Hawthorne has similar aid?" "Yes," Sybil replied. "He has a mean streak a mile wide!" exclaimed the Sprite. Paul Revere chuckled. "I like your friend. She's a bit of a delight, though exasperating at times." "But I'm a true patriot. I am a friend of Bitsy Roth," she declared. "She made me this dress." "It's Betsy. Oh, never mind," Sybil muttered, waving off the correction. "Well, I'm glad for the aid. We have a long road tonight. I must make the militia aware that the British soldiers are on their way. They are bent on finding our cache of weapons and seizing them. I ride to Lexington and then on to Concord." "And we will do what we can to aid you, sir," the young woman replied. "Freedom!" Tansy cried, spiraling skyward in a bright whirl of wings and moonlight. Revere smiled. The old stories of fairies were from the old world. Places like Ireland, Scotland, and the like, he said. Some of my friends have family from there and have shared fables. As far as I could tell, said Sybil, they followed the Scots and Irish to this new world. Why some have chosen sides in our dispute with the crown, that remains a riddle even to me. According to Tansy, most just largely ignore humans and attend to their own affairs. Have you asked her? Yes, but I can never seem to get a straight answer. Since they come from Scotland and Ireland, maybe it has to do with the oppression of those people by the British, but that doesn't explain why some side with the British. Perhaps some are simply attached to certain families. The old tales talk of creatures like brownies that do. That's an interesting point. A clapboard house appeared in the moonlight. Ah, this is John Parker's home. He is captain of the Lexington militia, Revere stated as he pulled up his horse up front. He dismounted and stepped onto the porch and knocked on the door. Parker, it's Revere, awake, the British are coming, he shouted. They heard coughing as someone approached the door. A stout, middle-aged man appeared as the door swung open. Revere? Aye, we need to raise the militia. The British are on their way, and they are intent on trouble. The man coughed again, thin, rattling, and deep. Illness clung to him like a shadow. Even by the weak glow of the candle, Sybil could see the pallor beneath his stubble and the strain etched around his eyes. I'll get dressed, he said, before doubling over in a wheezing cough. Wincing, he clutched his sides. He drew in a shaky breath and released it in a thin, whistling exhale. Good, friend, I must ride on. They swung onto their horses and rode on. I hid, Tansy said, flitting next to the two riders. I didn't want to shock him. His life song is ragged. The winter inside of him is winning, she said in a subdued voice, in contrast to her normal cheery and excitable demeanor. He has the consumption, Paul Revere replied, but he is still strong, a stout son of liberty. He will rouse the people and lend what strength he can. Shadows thickened as they entered another copse of trees. Rounding a bend, Revere reined in hard. Two shapes stood ahead on the trail, half carved from moonlight and darkness. One was a man, and beside him loomed a short, squat figure, its outline dense and hunched like something quarried from stone. Silas! Exclaimed Sybil. Look out! Tansy shouted as the creature shuddered and something akin to icicles raced toward them. One shard hissed past Sybil's ear, but another struck Revere's horse along the flank, carving a red and white gash rimmed with frost. The horse screamed and plunged into the trees, thrashing wildly as Revere fought to stay in the saddle. The man in the road dashed into the trees after him. Mr. Revere! Sybil shouted as she threw herself from the horse and dashed into the trees after them. Tansy flew at the winter fairy, shouting something in her native tongue. Sybil raced into the dense thicket of trees, frantically looking for her companion, shouting his name. She stumbled into a clearing, branches grasping at the folds of her skirts as she heard the report of a musket. Silas was standing in the moonlight, pistol raised, pointing at Revere, who had fallen from his horse. Fortunately, the bullet went wide and missed its mark. The young loyalist flipped the pistol in his hand, gripping it by the barrel to use as a club, and lunged at Revere. Sybil sprinted toward them as the two men crashed together in a tangle of limbs. Revere seized the pistol, keeping the young man from smashing it into his skull, and drove a fist into Silas's side. Silas grunted, but grappled with feral determination. They rolled in the moonlit forest scrub as each tried to gain dominance over the other. The older Revere was holding his own against his much younger assailant. Sybil caught up watching the wrestling match. She frantically swung her head side to side, watching the action and trying to figure out what to do to help. Suddenly, Revere drove a knee into Silas's stomach. The blow knocked the breath from the young loyalist, loosening his grip with a sharp oomph. Revere staggered upright and lurched toward the trees at the edge of the clearing. Silas recovered fast, far too fast, and sprang after him. Just as Revere reached the shadows, Silas leapt onto his back. The two crashed down again, limbs thrashing, and then, in a blink, they were simply gone. Sybil skidded to a halt, staring at the empty patch of ground. "Stop, Sibby!" Tansy cried as she shot into the clearing. Sybil froze. Tansy jabbed a tiny finger toward a ring of pale mushrooms. "That's a fairy circle! They've fallen into the Feywild!" A snarl tore through the clearing. The winter gremlin burst from the tree, spotted them, and charged. "I'm going after them," Sybil said, her voice steeled. "Sibby, no!" Tansy shrieked, but her friend had already stepped into the circle and vanished. The gremlin launched itself at Tansy. They collided midair and tumbled into the ring of mushrooms, and vanished as well. Chapter 6. Into Fairy. Sybil tumbled through the air and hit the ground with a heavy thump, breath rushing from her lungs. She pushed herself upright, brushing off her clothes as her eyes widened with wonder. All around her rose a strange forest of towering stalks. Shaped vaguely like enormous spears of purple asparagus, their tips swaying as if stirred by a wind that she could not feel. Beneath her feet spread a carpet of crimson grass, each blade softly luminescent, casting eerie ripples of red light through the perpetual twilight that seemed to permeate this place. She was completely alone. "Tansy? Mr. Revere?" she called into the dim air. The twilight swallowed her voice as if tasting it. No reply drifted back, only her breath. "Hello?" A flicker of motion slipped through the bizarre trees above her head, releasing a sharp crystalline twitter that made her wince reflexively. She squinted upward, but the twilight warped the branches, hiding whatever had made the sound. Eyes wide, she crept through the strange wilderness, scanning every shifting shadow of danger. She went on for what she guessed was half an hour, calling now and then for Tansy or Mr. Revere. Chittering sounds drifted from the canopy overhead, always just out of sight, as if the branches themselves were gossiping about her. Perhaps it was for the best that she couldn't spot the creatures watching her. Tansy had warned her often enough that Fairy was beautiful, yes, but beautiful in the way a rose with thorns is beautiful. "This is Tansy's homeland," she murmured, the words slipping out more for the comfort of another voice than for any real answer. Sybil found herself at the edge of a river. She stood at its shore, turning slowly in place, hopelessness tugging at her as she tried to decide where to go next. Across the water, the flora shifted abruptly. Gone were the towering asparagus-like stalks. In their place rose vast blue fronds like oversized ferns, each shot through with veins of glowing green. It took her several breaths to realize what was wrong. The river made no sound. No splash of water over stone, no rushing current, no whisper of movement. It carved its way through the Feywild in perfect, unsettling silence. Sybil Sybil knelt and dipped her hand into the current, only to jerk back in shock. There was no wetness. Her skin felt unchanged, untouched. "That's odd," she whispered, staring at the impossibly silent, impossibly dry river. Cautiously, she extended her hand into the river again, this time prepared for the strangeness, and gasped as her fingers slid not through water, but through light itself. The current swirled in ribbons of blue and green and the occasional pulse of red, moving with all the fluid grace of water, yet radiating a soft, living glow that clung to her skin before dissolving into the air. "Amazing," she breathed, studying her hand before her face, astonished to see it perfectly dry and untouched. "I wish that I knew where to find Tansy or Mr. Revere." She gazed back into the river of light and was astounded to witness the light coalesce before her, revealing a faint figure on its surface. As she leaned in closer, she discerned an image of Mr. Revere strolling around a courtyard composed entirely of ice. The walls resembled those of a castle, but instead of stone, they were blocks of intricately carved ice. Figures of fantastical creatures gracefully danced and intertwined themselves around beautifully drawn flourishes of flowers and plants. He was pacing back and forth, clutching his sides in an attempt to ward off the cold. "What is it?" a voice hissed in the ferns on the other side of the river of light. "It's not Fay." "Not its, isn't." A small reptilian creature with luminescent green scales adorned with gold descended from the canopy of blue and green ferns, using its prehensile tail. Its enormous eyes, large black pupils, and orange glow with a strange otherworldly light caught her attention. The creature jerked its head side to side as it examined her. "How did it get here? This creature is truly strange. It's not summer, not winter, not Fay at all. No, no, no. I am human. My name is Sybil." She shot her hand to her mouth, suddenly remembering that Tansy had warned her that names were a very powerful thing amongst the Fay, not to be given lightly. It plopped down onto a large glowing leaf and cocked its head again. "Gives us its name," it did. Its eyes pulsed different hues of orange as if it were excited. Sybil noticed that the creature not only had a prehensile tail, that it now kept wrapping and unwrapping around its tiny body as if it was a nervous habit, but it also had 6 legs. It sat on 2 of them and waved the other 4 back and forth. "I'm looking for my friends, Tansy and Paul Revere." It tilted its head to the left with a jerking motion and uttered, "Pa oo raver? Tin say? See feel?" It attempted to pronounce the foreign words, struggling to get the pronunciation right. "More precious names it gifts us." Sybil grunted and threw her hands to her mouth again. "Can you help me find them? I'm new to your land and lost." It leapt off of its perch, and to Sybil's amazement skated across the river of light. It did not plunge into its flowing currents, but instead the light simply shimmered around its paws as it slid across. It scrambled up the trunk of the purple asparagus and continued flicking its head side to side as it stared at her with its impossibly large, orange glowing eyes. "It gifts us its name, but not its whole name. No, 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 it doesn't. Maybe another gift it has for me." A gift?" "Yes. It sees in the river its friend, yes? Yes, it does. Show it's where its friend is, I can, but for a gift. You can? Sybil replied hopefully. I don't have anything to give as a gift. What's it's got in its pocketses? The creature asked, continuing to jerk its head side to side frenetically, its tail now grabbing onto the trunk of the tree and releasing it in excitement. Pockets? She echoed, patting her thighs in a startled, almost defensive reflex. She looked down and slid her hand into her waistband and pulled out a little pouch. Pulling the drawstring open, she fished out a little case containing a needle and thimble. I have this, she offered. The creature hissed. Iron! It has iron! It offers us dangerous gifts! It began scrambling up and down the tree trunk frantically, pausing to wave its multiple legs in the air. Okay, she gasped. Hold on. She fished further into the pouch and pulled out a small coin. No, more metal, she said as the creature gasped even louder. Okay, here. Sybil held up a small vial. It's perfume. Reform? Yes. Makes you smell pretty, she said, uncorking the vial and sniffing it in demonstration. Gives it? It's will gifts us, the strange little reptile declared, holding out one of its hands. The paw morphed into a four-fingered hand before her eyes. Sybil extended the vial, and the creature snatched it from her hand, sniffing it before extending a long, thin tongue into the vial and flicking the liquid. Ooh, tasty! It gulped the full contents down its gullet. Its eyes pulsed shades of orange and red again in excitement. Okay, now you have your gift. You owe me a favor. You said that you could lead me to my friend. Ah, yes. It speaks truth, it does, smirked the creature. But it did not say's when. I thinks that I will wait to see how long this creature can wade through this forest before it becomes snack. What? You promised help for the gift. But it's not say when I have to give help. By heavens, you rogue! The creature's eyes only continued to pulse differing hues as it grinned at her. Another gift it has? What? Another gift? No. Then we waits to see it's become a snack. Sybil glared at it in consternation. What impudence! It only continued to smile. You will honor your bargain now, said a voice above them. Sybil lifted her gaze to see a little, tawny-mopped fairy hovering in the air, robed in a makeshift dress of red, white, and blue. Tansy! Sibby, I found you. I'm so happy. I've been looking for you for 2 weeks. 2 weeks? But I've only been here for maybe an hour or so. Time flows differently in fairy, Sibby. The little sprite put her hands akimbo and glared at the gold-laced green reptile clinging to the tree. You know full well that the laws only apply when both parties know all of the rules. Sibby is human and doesn't know our ways. The creature looked down at the forest floor and licked its lips with a darting tongue. I will report you to Summer. You would not like that, she declared, shaking a finger. Fine. I will take you to your friend, it pouted, eyes now pulsing darker shades in dejection. It hopped off the tree and landed beside the stream, where the swirling blues and purples of the light river shimmered over its hide, layering its green and gold scales with shifting iridescent colors. It will think of its friend a second time, the odd creature said, gesturing with 4 arms. Sybil stepped closer and, looking to the river, said, "I wish to see Mr. Revere." The light water coalesced and once again revealed a scene of him pacing in the frozen courtyard. The six-legged reptile swept its paws across the surface, and at once its entire body flared with green-gold radiance, the light rippling over it like a heartbeat. "Jump," it said. "Jump?" "It will jump to go to friend." Sybil looked hesitantly at Tansy. "Jump, Sibby. I'm right behind you. It's safe." She turned back to the image of the Patriot pacing in that frozen courtyard, drew a steadying breath, and with a decisive shrug, plunged into the river of light. She expected to fall into the icy courtyard, but instead she simply stepped out of the wall. A swirling vortex of blue-purple light glowed on its surface. Tansy flew through behind her, and the portal vanished. "Egads, Miss Luddington!" the man ejaculated. "Thank heavens I found you, Mr. Revere." Her mouth puffed steam in the cold air as she spoke. "Hi, Polly," Tansy greeted as she zoomed around his head. "The rescue team has arrived." "Where? How?" he sputtered. "Oh, I shouldn't be surprised, given all that I've learned about this realm these last few months." "Months?" gasped Sybil. "I told you that time moves differently in my world," the sprite said, lighting on the young woman's shoulder. She looked around. "We are in a winter stronghold," she whispered a bit nervously. "You are indeed," said a deep voice from behind them. They turned around. A towering figure stood before them, draped in furs that shifted like drifting snow, never settling into a single pattern. Antlers curved from his brow, long, spiraled, and faintly luminous, as though carved from moonlight frozen in mid-glow. His ice-blue eyes, set with sideways pupils, were startling against the skin so white it seemed translucent. Though his upper body was that of a human, it flowed seamlessly into the powerful form of a great white stag, its muscles rippling beneath fur that shimmered with frost, each breath dusting the air with crystalline mist. My wardens announced that new guest had arrived. "Lord Stalwyn," Revere greeted him. "My esteemed Mr. Revere," the Fae nodded in return. Sybil glanced between them, a hint of surprise in the corner of her eyes. "Hold on a moment. You both seem quite cordial." The Fae Lord raised an eyebrow, his fingers twitching beneath his chin. They were adorned with intricate rings of ice. "Lieutenant Revere is my guest. Of course we are cordial." "Lieutenant? Guest?" Revere looked at Sybil. "I am a lieutenant of artillery and the militia, Miss Luddington, and I am his guest." "Winter does not have guests," Tansy exclaimed. "They only have prisoners." The antlered Fae sighed and turned his attention to her. "My dear friend of summer," he said, "not all those of winter are as nasty as you suppose, just as not all of summer are safe and generous." He paced around the courtyard, waving his arms in a sweeping gesture. His robe swirled around his form. "He has been regaling me with stories of his people's rebellion against their monarch. Humans, so amazing to me. In my world such behavior would be unconscionable. The queen of the frozen realm would make my stay in her dungeons most uncomfortable for a century or two if I attempted such a thing." Sybil looked at the Fae Lord and back at Revere. "If he is your guest, why have you held him here for 2 months? He has a vital mission to fulfill for our cause. He has failed now because you have detained him." Revere laid a hand gently on the young woman's arm. Miss Luddington, this is exactly why he has been hosting me. As your tiny friend has said, time flows differently in this realm, and especially between this world and ours. So I've been searching for this, Lord Stalwyn declared, drawing from his pocket an ice crystal so intricate it seemed less crafted and more grown from the marrow of winter itself. It hovered a hair above his palm rather than touching it, rotating with the slow, deliberate grace of a planet in miniature. Fractals of impossible geometry bloomed and collapsed within its core. "What is that?" queried Sybil, eyes wide in wonder. Tansy flew closer. "It is a time crystal," she whispered in awe. "Very rare. I have only heard stories about them." "What does it do?" "My minions have scoured the hidden folds of frost and shadow for this," Stalwyn said, his voice carrying the hush of distant glaciers. "Only today did they bring it forth. With this shard one may slip from fairy and emerge in the mortal world at a place and moment of one's choosing, provided time itself does not object." "I aim to return to Lexington. I must needs alert both Messrs. Adams and Hancock," Revere stated. He turned to the Fey Lord. "I am indeed indebted to you, sir, and thank you for your hospitality, but my need is quite urgent. Mayhaps I could return some day when events are more settled and we could talk further." "I will see what I can arrange, Lieutenant. And you owe me naught. I am merely repaying a debt for stories told. Knowledge and wisdom are worth more than gold is to you humans." He held forth the hovering crystal. "State your desire as I taught you, my friend." "I want to go to Lexington at midnight on April 18th in the year of our Lord 1775. With my companion, Tansy of Summer and Miss Sybil Luddington." And with a flash they were gone. Chapter 7. Lexington. They found themselves on the Lexington Village Green. In the darkness they could make out several buildings and trees about them. "This way," ordered Revere. "Adams and Hancock are staying with Reverend Clark." "It might be best, Tansy, that you stay out of sight. We don't have time to explain you to others," Sybil said. "Fine," she said, pouting a little, and she flitted up onto a tree branch. They made their way over toward the house. There was a young man lounging on the porch. "Young man," shouted Revere, "rouse the house." "I would ask you to be quiet, sir. It is midnight. Please keep down the noise." "Noise? You'll have noise enough before long. The regulars are coming out." The man leapt to his feet. "The regulars?" "Aye, get me Adams and Hancock." The young man dashed into the house, and a few minutes later 2 elderly men came to the door in their nightgowns. "Revere!" exclaimed one. "Adams, thank heaven. I'm rousting the countryside. The regulars are out and heading this way." "Egads!" exclaimed the other, presumably Hancock. "We need to alert the local militia," Adams stated while running a hand through his bed-ruffled hair. "Good. I'm off to Concord to warn them." "Excellent, sir. They have our stores there, arms, powder, provisions. We cannot let them fall into British hands." "I already stopped at Captain John Parker's house and notified him," Revere told Adams and Hancock. "He should be rousting others as well and heading this way." "James!" Hancock shouted over his shoulder. The young man who had been guarding on the porch appeared. "Get some boys and head out to the outlying farms. No need to head to Captain Parker's house." "I'll need a horse for me and one for my companion," Revere said, indicating Sybil. "How did you get here without horses?" Adams asked. "It's a long story. I'll tell you later. But we lost them and must needs make haste." Adams turned back to James and said, "Before you go, wake up the stable boy." James nodded and headed out the door. Within short order, the horses were saddled and they were ready to go. "I wish you Godspeed, Paul," Adams said, still standing in the cool night air in his sleeping gown with a coat thrown over it. "I hope to be back before dawn," he replied. "If all goes well, I should be." Hancock came out of the house dressed in a brand new military uniform, fussing with the belt of a saber at his hip as though daring someone to stop him. "What are you doing, John?" Adams exclaimed. "I'm staying to fight." "You should flee, Hancock," Revere said firmly. "Both you and Adams are leaders of this rebellion. To lose either of you tonight would be a grievous blow." "I want to stay and fight, damn it," Hancock snapped. Adams let out a slow breath. "Our business is of a different character, John. Revere is right. Others must fire the first shots so that we may see this cause through." Hancock's jaw tightened, his hand gripping the hilt of his saber so hard that his knuckles turned white. "And hide in the brush like a common thief? I am the chairman of the Committee of Safety. If the Lexington men are to stand on that green, I belong at their head." "You belong in the halls of power, not in a shallow grave," Adams countered, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly intensity. He stepped closer, placing a hand on Hancock's velvet sleeve. "If you are captured, the king doesn't just hang a soldier. He hangs the revolution. Is your pride worth the noose for us all?" Hancock looked from Adams to the darkened road, the fire in his eyes flickering. Revere checked the priming of his pistol, his eyes darting toward the window. "Time is of the essence. The choice must be made now, gentlemen." "The carriage is being readied," Adams pushed, sensing the shift in Hancock's resolve. "We go to Woburn. We live to write the laws of a new nation, John. Let the militia handle the lead. We must handle the legacy." Hancock let out a long, frustrated growl and unbuckled the heavy saber belt, tossing it onto a nearby chair with a hollow thud. "Fine, but I shall not go quietly." He turned his sharp gaze toward the young woman standing in the shadows by the hearth. "And who is this? Another messenger?" Revere looked at Sybil. "She is with me, a true daughter of liberty. She is riding with me to Concord." "A young woman on such a mission," Hancock harumphed, clearly attempting to divert attention from his losing argument. "Do not worry, sir," Revere replied evenly. "She has already proven herself to be quite resourceful." He met Sybil's eye for a brief moment, and then let his gaze drift, almost imperceptibly, up towards the branches above. Chapter 8. On to Concord. The road narrowed as they rode, the darkness pressing close on either side. Branches arched overhead, swallowing the moonlight. A diminutive figure slipped down from the trees and darted after them, barely more than a flicker of pale motion at the edge of sight. For a time, only the sound of hooves and breathing filled the night. "Mr. Hancock is an interesting man," Sybil said at last, her voice low but steady. "He is a fierce warrior," Tansey declared, looping once in the air, as if punctuating the claim. Revere snorted softly. "He is a vain fool who will only get himself killed," he said, the words bitten off between clenched teeth. "But he is also a political genius, and too important to lose." "Are there truly armaments in Concord?" Revere nodded once. "Powder, shot, cannon enough to matter. Enough that the Crown would dearly like to take them before dawn." Sybil's mouth set into a hard, determined line. "Then we will make it," she said. "We have to." Revere glanced at her, something like pride flickering across his face before it vanished. "You ride as though the night itself is urging you on, Miss Ludington. I am glad, very glad, that you are here with me." "And her faithful sidekick Tansey," the Sprite proclaimed, spinning in a tight spiral. "We ride for freedom." Revere huffed a quiet laugh. "Yes," he said, "you as well, little Fay. An unexpected ally, but a welcome one." They crested a hill, and in the wash of open moonlight they glimpsed movement behind them. Several riders slipped into view along an adjoining road, their silhouettes too orderly to be chance travelers. Revere's mouth tightened. "A British patrol," he said. "We've been seen. We must make haste." Tansy vanished into the night like a struck spark and returned an instant later, breathless. "Bedcoats for certain, Polly." "Then we ride," Revere said, already driving his heels in. His horse leapt forward, and Sybil urged hers to match the pace as Tansy streaked ahead, guiding them into the dark. They raced along the dirt road when suddenly Revere's horse stumbled. The sound was wrong. Not the hollow thud of hoof on packed earth, but a sharp, ugly crack as iron struck stone. The bay lurched beneath him, cried out, and dropped to one knee. Revere swore under his breath and hauled the reins, barely keeping himself from being pitched onto the road. Sybil reined up hard beside him. "Mr. Revere." "I'm all right," he said, already sliding from the saddle. The horse struggled upright again, favoring its foreleg, breathing hard. Revere ran his hand down the leg, fingers searching, and dread tightening in his chest. A stone, half buried, sharp as a blade, jutted from the road. The shoe was bent, the fetlock already swelling. "No," he muttered. "Damn it, no." Behind them, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of hooves, many hooves, disciplined and measured. Tansy hovered near Sybil's shoulder, her wings a blur, eyes wide. "Bedcoats," she whispered. "They're close." Revere looked up the road towards Concord, then back the way they had come. Lantern light flickered between the trees. He made his decision in a breath. "Sybil," he said, already pulling the saddle from his horse's back. "You must go now." "What? No, sir, we stay together. Your horse can still run, mine can't. They'll have us both if we linger." "They'll kill you." "No, they won't," he said, though he was far from certain. His voice dropped fierce and urgent. "They'll question me, delay me, that's all the time that you need." Sybil shook her head, jaw set. "I won't leave you." Revere stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You are faster than I am tonight. Concord must be warned." Tansy darted between them. "He's right, Sibby." The patrol crested the bend in the road. Steel flashed. A shouted command rang out in the dark. Revere put his hands on Sybil's shoulders. "Ride. Don't look back." For a heartbeat she hesitated, then swung into the saddle. The horse surged forward at her urging, hooves striking sparks as it leapt past Revere and down the road. Tansy streaked after her like a fallen star. Revere turned to face the oncoming soldiers. "Stand fast!" a voice barked. "In the King's name!" Revere raised his hands, forcing his breathing to steady, watching Sybil vanish into the darkness ahead. Then the patrol was upon him, muskets leveled, sabers drawn, and the night closed in around him. With one last glance over her shoulder, Sybil rode on into the darkness. The road a pale ribbon before her, until a sound ahead made her rein in despite herself. Footsteps hurried and uneven. Tansy flashed forward and returned at once. "There's a man ahead," she said. "He's leading his horse, not riding it." Sybil frowned. "That does not sound like a British soldier." "No," Tansy agreed, "and he wears no uniform." Sybil urged her horse on more cautiously and soon drew close. A tall young man in fine clothes walked beside a horse lathered with sweat, his face strained, his movements urgent. A doctor's medical bag was strapped to the saddle. She called out, firm and wary, "Who are you, sir?" "Who asks? And what is a young woman doing out at this late hour in the woods?" he retorted. "I ride on urgent business." "As do I. I hope to meet my friend Paul Revere." "You know him?" He fetched a small silver token from his pocket. It bore Revere's seal. "My name is Samuel Prescott. I was dispatched along with Paul to rouse the countryside." "Another son of liberty!" Tansy exclaimed, suddenly revealing herself. "Egads, what is that?" Sybil did not hesitate. "This is Tansy, a friend and an ally." Prescott stared. "I've heard stories," he said softly, "but never thought to see one." "You see her now," Sybil replied, "and tonight she rides with us." Just then another British scouting party emerged from the woods. "More bedcoats," Tansy whispered. "If you can reach Concord, Doctor, I'll draw them away," Sybil said. Prescott hesitated only for a moment. "Then God go with you." Tansy leaned close to the horse and whispered, dust flaring like fireflies. The animal surged with renewed strength. "Ride," Sybil urged. Prescott vanished down the road towards Concord. Another patrol thundered into view. The soldiers shouted and pointed. "Give chase!" Sybil wheeled her horse around and plunged into the woods. What followed was a long, punishing game of shadows and sound. She led them through tangled forest paths where branches tore at uniforms and horses balked. She doubled back across streams to muddle their scent, and then burst out into open fields only to vanish again into stone-walled lanes and half-forgotten farm tracks. Tansy flitted ahead, snapping twigs in false directions, coaxing owls in sudden flight, kindling ghost lights deep in the trees. Hours passed. The moon slid westward, the eastern sky paled from black to indigo, and then to the faintish wash of gray. Orders grew hoarse, then angry, and then uncertain. One by one, patrols peeled away, convinced that the rider they chased was more phantom than flesh. At last, Sybil slowed her horse on a rise where the trees thinned and the land opened before her. A thin band of light crested the horizon. Smoke rose in gentle threads from chimneys below. She recognized the shape of the land with a jolt of surprise. "Lexington," she whispered. The night's grip loosened as dawn took hold. No shouts followed, no hooves answered. Only the distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of morning stirred the air. "They're gone," Tansy said, softly hovering close. Sybil rested her forehead against her horse's mane, exhaustion and awe crashing over her together. She had ridden through darkness, fear, and confusion, and emerged here at the edge of something already waking. Somewhere ahead, the day was about to change everything. Sybil straightened in the saddle and turned her horse toward the village green as the first light of dawn broke over Lexington. Chapter 9, Dawn on the Green. As Sybil rode up, she saw that a number of militiamen were already lining up on one side of the green, their boots sinking slightly into the damp turf. More men were pouring out of the local tavern, some still half-buttoned, others clutching muskets as a young lad beat the call to arms on his drum, the uneven rhythm echoing across the common. Farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and fishermen assembled into rough ranks, faces drawn, eyes sharp with fear and resolve. A few wore newly minted blue uniforms, most did not. There were fewer than 100 of them, and Sybil knew at a glance that they were painfully aware of it. Captain John Parker, in his uniform, paced to and fro across the green, coughing between barking orders, his tuberculosis ravaged lungs struggling in the cool morning air. On the far side of the green came the British regulars, ranks of men in sharp red coats advancing with practiced precision, muskets shouldered, bayonets fixed, and gleaming faintly in the new light. Their boots struck the earth in a steady, relentless cadence, each step measured, each movement drilled into muscle and bone. To Sybil's eye they seemed less like individuals than a single advancing body. Riding behind them was their commander, Major John Pitcairn, mounted and watchful, his presence reinforcing the order and discipline that set them in such stark contrast to the fragile, uneven line facing them. She could see at once that the Patriots were outnumbered at least 2-1. "Stand your ground! Don't fire unless fired upon," shouted Captain Parker. "But if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." The British major rode out ahead of his men onto the green. "Lay down your arms, you damned rebels, and disperse." Parker and Pitcairn locked eyes across the span for a brief charged moment, two officers measuring not just one another, but the consequences of whatever came next. No one seemed to notice the young girl astride an exhausted horse lingering at the edge of the green, her presence swallowed by the gravity of the standoff. Tansy hovered close to Sybil's ear, her voice hushed now, edged with unease. "This is the place," she whispered. "This is where it breaks." Captain Parker raised his voice, sharp and urgent. "Men, disperse, but do not surrender your arms." Just as the militia began to turn away, a sudden flash of pale light flared in front of the British line. With a sharp crack like ice splitting on a frozen pond, a young man appeared out of nowhere astride a great frost-white steed, its breath steaming, its form strange and otherworldly against the morning mist. Sybil shot upright in her stirrups. "Silas Hawthorne!" Startled, Redcoat shouted and recoiled at the sudden apparition, ranks buckling as men flinched and stumbled back. A single musket cracked, whether loose by accident or fear Sybil could not tell. For the briefest instant the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the line answered as one, a disciplined wall of flame and thunder erupting in a crashing volley that shattered the fragile stillness of the green. Several rounds tore into the white steed, darkening its hide as it screamed and reared. One ball struck Silas high in the shoulder, spinning him sideways in the saddle. Man and horse went down together in a tangle of frost and blood, the steed collapsing with crushing force. Silas cried out as his leg was trapped beneath the animal's weight, the air driven from his lungs. More rounds tore into the Patriots as they filed away, men crying out as bodies fell, some wounded, some lifeless, onto the trampled grass. Panic rippled through the line, then hardened into resolve. Almost as one, the militia wheeled about and fired in return, their ragged volley flashing and roaring back across the green into the red-coated ranks. Some soldiers dropped as the second rank returned fire. Then chaos ensued as they broke ranks and charged the militia with bayonets leveled. Sybil looked on in horror as the Patriots fired again. Major Pitcairn cursed and spurred his horse into the midst of his swarming soldiers. "Damn it, men, I did not order a charge," he shouted, striking at lowered bayonets with the flat of his sword. "Cease fire! Reform ranks!" The drummer caught his attempts at once and began beating the signal to cease fire and reform. The Patriot militia broke ranks, fleeing the green in a ragged run as smoke and shouts swallowed the fields. The British commander continued to shout and curse as he forced his men back into order, riding the line and striking muskets aside until discipline reasserted itself. Some of the soldiers jeered as the militia fled, calling out, "We have beaten the rebels, and look at them run," even as the ranks were reformed. When the noise finally subsided, Pitcairn reined in his horse and surveyed them grimly. "Very well," he said, "you have won the field. Pray God this does not grow into something more. We march on to our true destination, Concord." A low murmur of dissatisfaction rippled through the ranks. Pitcairn closed his eyes for a moment and exhaled. "One cheer," he allowed, "and then a salute. After that we move." Grins spread despite the smoke and blood. A sergeant lifted his voice. "Huzzah!" The crowd echoed down the line, followed by a ragged volley fired skyward, noise and triumph rising into the pale morning air even as the green lay littered with the cost of it. The men straightened their lines and reloaded their muskets. A lieutenant shouted, "Support arms!" They shouldered their muskets. Pitcairn shouted, "By the right, forward march!" He led them off the green and onto the road to Concord. 200 boots left the trampled grass and struck the packed dirt in steady rhythm. Just as the main column, another 500 men emerged down the road in support. Without pause, the column folded together and pressed onward toward the town. The pounding of their boots slowly faded as they marched away from Lexington, leaving the green to its smoke, its dead, and its dreadful silence. Chapter 10. A World Set in Motion. Sybil slid from the saddle and raced to Silas's side as he stirred moaning. In the chaos, no one had noticed that his dead steed had morphed back into his natural shape. The small gremlin's body lay still in the grass, several ragged holes in his torso. Tansy flitted to its side. "He is gone." "I didn't realize that fairies died so easily," Sybil stated. "Those are metal bullets," Tansy said as she watched his body dissolve into mist. "Metal is not good for us. Very bad. Lethal." Several men and women were now streaming onto the green, hurrying over to the other prone forms in the grass. As people looked over them, a tall, older man in clerical clothes observed. "From this day will be dated the liberty of the world," he said pensively. He and a young woman at his side strode over to Sybil. "I am Reverend Jonas Clark." "Sybil Luddington," she replied. The young woman bent to help stop the bleeding in Silas's shoulder. She had a dainty handkerchief in her hand that she applied to the site of the wound. "I am his daughter Elizabeth." "And who is this?" the minister questioned, his gaze dropping toward the wounded man. Sybil hesitated and then answered plainly, "Silas Hawthorne, a loyalist. He rode to stop us from raising the alarm." The minister's mouth tightened. Then he would have seen the countryside sleep through its own undoing. "He failed," Sybil said quietly, "and he bled for it." Another man ran up. "Reverend, we have 8 dead and a number wounded." "Take the dead and wounded to the meeting house. We will tend to them there," he said without taking his eyes off of Silas. "And please call some militiamen over to arrest this man." The reverend moved on to attend to the other wounded, but his daughter remained kneeling at Silas's side. Sybil exhaled sharply and looked down at him. "You are a fool, Silas. You know that, don't you? This land does not need the rule of a tyrant." "Hear, hear," piped up the sprite, who had gone unnoticed until now. "No King Georgy Porgy telling us what to do." Elizabeth glanced up, startled but composed, her hands never leaving the bandage. "Oh, you have a fairy companion." Sybil blinked. You know about them?" Elizabeth allowed herself the faintest smile. "I walk the countryside often," she said. "One learns to notice what others overlook." "This is Tansy." "Hello, Tansy," Elizabeth said, studying her with open curiosity. "And you do resemble the tansy herb, don't you?" The sprite folded her tiny arms, looking pleased. "I get that a lot," she said. "Hello, Lizzie." Silas stirred and spoke through clenched teeth. "King George is our rightful lord and king." Elizabeth paused and then answered gently, her voice steady. "There are many in the colonies who would agree with you," she said, "but I believe you will find yourself standing on the wrong side of history on this one." The 2 ladies helped him to his feet as 2 militiamen approached to take him away. "I'd best be getting some linens for bandages and prepping hot water. Would you be willing to help at the church with the wounded, Sybil?" "Yes, certainly, Elizabeth." The young woman headed across the green toward her father's house as another figure approached. Sybil turned her attention to see that it was Paul Revere. "Mr. Revere!" "Aye, just made it back. The British patrol finally set me free but took my horse. I had to walk back. Looks like much has happened here. Did you make it to Concord?" "I helped Dr. Prescott go to Concord by leading a British patrol on a wild chase through the forest." "Good, thank you, Miss Luddington. Your services have been of inestimable value." "She couldn't have done it without the help of her faithful sidekick, Tansy the Patriot," shouted the Sprite. Revere laughed. "Yes, thanks to you, too, Tansy." He turned back to the young woman. "What transpired here?" She explained to him all that had happened. "So the British fired first?" "I think so, but it's hard to tell in all the chaos." Revere looked across the green at men burying the dead and helping the wounded limp toward the meeting house. "Then this was no common volley," he said quietly. "This shot shall indeed be heard round the world, and with it the revolution is set in motion." The little Sprite shot aloft with a triumphant cry, her tiny arm raised high in a fist. Her minuscule form, clad in red, white, and blue, fluttered in the breeze. "Freedom!"